Hey, welcome everybody to the Alby Living Life Podcast. Don't forget to hit the subscribe and like button. Special guest is a talented artist, entrepreneur, and he also runs his own ad agency. He's an Instagrammer as well. His name is Garett Campbell-Wilson. He goes by Gcamwil on Instagram. Welcome, Garett.
Hey, thank you for having me.
The honor is mine, man. You got some amazing stuff here. So I want to talk about some of your artwork. Your amazing artwork, some of your art classes that you teach, and what's going on with your ad agency during COVID and all that stuff. Let's bring up one of your art pieces here called The Protectors.
Yeah, that's a good place to start. So you like that painting. Why do you like that painting?
I just think the detail in it's pretty amazing, man. Like, I think you and I had this little talk beforehand, right? Where I told you I can kill a stick figure. So when I looked into your work, I'm just in awe, man. I could see the fibers of the muscle and everything that about this picture. I love the color of the red off the side and the blues and I don't know. Like, I don't know how else I can describe this, right? I feel like I have an artistic eye, but I don't have an artistic thing with my hands, at least. But how do you describe this picture? Like, how did you feel when you're, posting this and painting this and all that stuff?
You know what it is? So all of my paintings begin what I like to call a primordial place. I meditate quite a bit. I've been doing that for years, mainly through my foundation as a martial artist. So I'm always trying to bridge a connection between mind, body, spirit before I ever touch the paint.
Awesome.
And so with this particular painting, it was born from a series of works called Origin. This is going back to 2008, 2010. I was very focused on the spiritual being having a human experience. Mm-hmm. And so out of this series, what I was trying to capture was the energy of an individual, the part of an individual that typically goes unseen because we're only observing the physical. And so, I feel that when I meet people, when I communicate with people, I typically have a pretty quick read. I can feel energy pretty quickly, and I can tell when somebody's having a great day, and I can tell when somebody's having a bad day. Mm-hmm. So there's this layer behind the physical where some would call it an energy body, some would call it the spirit or the soul, but that's what I try to capture in my paintings. So this particular painting, The Protector, because of the times going back 2008, 2010, the world was quickly shifting. There was a lot of stuff happening in people's lives, and I was having conversations with friends, family, and the common topic across everyone was everyone wanted to protect their families. Mm-hmm. I thought about this a lot, and same thing for me as well. It's what I think about constantly. And so this painting, I created it as a way of forming a shield that could be brought up either in conversation or could be viewed and looked at for a long period of time. Mm-hmm. And just to know that if you are a protector, if you are a warrior, that you're strong enough to embrace the ups and downs, the pressure, and to protect those who are behind you.
Oh man, I love that. That's so deep, man. This is why I love talking to like artists and stuff. You just learn so much. I just look at that and it now explains a lot to me. That's a really amazing picture you have there, or painting you have there. Sorry about that.
No worries.
But yeah, like how long does something like that take you in general?
To make a painting? Well,
it depends on the size, right? Obviously.
Yeah, so that's the interesting thing about painting is there are so many factors that contribute to the time, right? Mm-hmm. I actually think the best paintings are made very quickly. Some of them are actually made in a night, maybe a couple days. And then there are some that take longer. It really depends on the style of painting. So I have a couple different styles. I've always bracketed myself as a multidisciplinary artist because from day one, it's been hard to put me in one box. Mm-hmm. And if you look at my paintings, you'll notice that there's a couple different styles in there. Mm-hmm. There's very loose and gestural style, like what we're looking at in The Protector. Yep. That is done with a sort of, wet on wet type of painting style. I use oils and I like to drag colors. I like to create contrasting color palettes and then drag them into each other and sculpt with the wet painting rather than a sort of drier painting method. I have a second method, which, in the Martin Luther King piece that you're asking me about, that style gets a little bit thicker where I'll actually load the brush. I'll load the brush with a significant amount of paint and I will sculpt the artwork using big, broad brush strokes. And then from there, the layers will continue to increase, but there's always a chance that you can push a painting overboard. And those are the ones that you will not see on my social media, right?
Yeah.
But you can definitely overwork a painting. And when that happens, I call it overbaked.
Yeah.
And so when I talk about my paintings, you might find that I draw a lot of similarities between what goes into making a painting from an artist's perspective, but I also draw comparisons to how a chef cooks.
Yeah.
Right. And there's the creative process of picking the ingredients. To me, the ingredients are the colors, picking your tools, your knives and your cutlery. To me, those are the brushes and, the different shapes of brushes that I'm using. Another comparison is the fact that watching my mom cook, because she's an incredible cook.
Yeah.
And when she moves in the kitchen and is, creating her art and creating her flavor,
It's like a perfect ballet, right?
It is. And you know what? I've subconsciously taken on her flow.
Yeah, that's awesome.
In certain aspects of my artwork.
Okay. Yeah, since we brought up the Martin Luther King one, let's bring that up now.
Sure.
Let's talk about that one. I really love this picture, this painting. I keep saying picture. I'm sorry, man. It's because I come from the photography world, right? And
still a picture.
Yeah, but it's a really nice painting, and a tribute to a man who spoke of dreams and fought to uphold them. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, let's talk about that. And how'd you go about in deciding that was going to be the vision right there for you?
So the Martin Luther King painting was inspired by Black History Month. And so there was a series of paintings I was creating called Heroes. I've been thinking about this for quite a long time. There's at least 8 paintings in that series right now where I painted certain figures,
I saw some of that,
certain recognizable figures. And it comes out of a desire to paint more Black history into art history. And then secondly, when I think about future generations, when I think about even my kids, one day, is that when they see these paintings, it'll be education for them.
Oh, most definitely. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot of this stuff, as you say, your kid, when they grow old, and same with your grandkids and generations down, I think this is going to be part of your legacy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no,
absolutely.
That's really nice. I really like that one too.
I mean, you know what? If they're not going to learn it in school, I would definitely like them to be able to have access to it at home.
Yes. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you got another one of a skull. It says, "A skull is timeless." I saw this one and I was like, oh, that's a cool painting. That's really cool. And then I noticed that you actually use skulls, right? Is this a real skull, or is it, or am I just looking at the wrong thing here?
No, this is an interesting post because what you're looking at is a sculpture of a skull that I made. The skull was probably the very first thing that I learned how to draw. I became fascinated with the skull, human anatomy, bones. I started learning anatomy when I was around 8. Just became fascinated by it. And I convinced myself that if I could memorize how to draw a skull, both its inner workings and from the outside, that I'd be able to draw anything. In art school, typically they will use a skull for life drawing classes, or to teach you how to draw planes, to teach you how to understand certain shapes on the human body. So that stuck with me for a long time. Now, the piece that we're talking about, so it's an actual sculpture. I was a part of a show called the International Day of the Dead exhibition. This was 2017, and there was a number of artists selected here in Vancouver to receive a skull that was handcrafted by some lovely ladies in Mexico, and then these skulls were shipped here to Vancouver for the purpose of the exhibition. And so I was one of those artists. We had about a 2-month period to take these templated ceramic skulls, and we could do anything we wanted with them, right? There's a lot of artists doing some really cool stuff, and when I saw what they were up to, I was like, okay, I want to do something a little bit different. And so I took out my sculpture tools and my chiseling tools, and I began to chip into the skull very carefully. And I just pulled from my database of experiences with the skull, and I carved actual skull shapes onto it to make it as realistic as possible. And what you're looking at right now is a photograph. Funny enough, the photograph ended up looking like a painting itself. So that's why it's a little bit indiscernible.
Yeah, actually, no, but it looks really cool though. Like, I like it. The shading and the chisel up on the top there, and the colors and all that. Yeah, no, it looks that's very artistic, if you ask me.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll have to show you some more images because I have pretty good documentation of the whole process of creating that piece. And one of these days, I'll show those to you.
For sure. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to post up a lot of your artwork on this YouTube, so for my listeners and our viewers to actually watch and see them. I have a bunch of artistic friends. Pretty sure that they'd be pretty stoked about looking at your stuff here for sure, and what what the information you're sharing right now too. I read somewhere on one of your studio posts there saying that from a private collector, saying art never really interested me until I saw Garett's drawings, and I think that's pretty cool. He could actually influence someone that was not really into art to suddenly be into art, right?
Man, it's funny you picked up on that, because there's a bit of a backstory behind that. Because when I first started showing my paintings, I didn't know how people would interpret the artwork. But as I sat back and watched them, I noticed that there was people from all different walks of life who would spend some serious time looking at the paintings. I mean, the average amount of time that anyone spends in a museum or a gallery looking at a particular piece of art, I think, is around 8 to 12 seconds.
Really? That's it?
To the next one. Yeah, it's actually the attention span is decreasing big time, and I think that was the stat. Don't quote me on that. I'm going to Google that, but
yeah, that's right.
It was a very short amount of time, but people would spend a lot of time staring at my paintings, and so I would walk up to them and say, "Hey, what do you see?" The responses would be very, very different. Everyone would have a different take. Most of those people were passerbyers, or, like you said, people who weren't necessarily interested in art, but for some reason my painting captured them. And so there's quite a bit of my fan base who exclusively collect my work, because
awesome.
Even though they're not very interested in art or galleries, they don't look into the art world, but my artwork touches them, and it inspires them to have it in their homes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, to actually have, like you say, or like I read earlier, like someone that's not really into art to actually get into art, like, and you influence that. That's amazing. And I think that, you keep that passion going. I think your artwork is amazing, and I think you're going to do really well, my friend.
Thank you, my friend.
Let's talk a little bit about entrepreneurship here. So shed some light on that for me.
So the entrepreneurship, look, I grew up sitting around a round table with my dad and my grandfather, and we used to do this thing called talking business. Mm-hmm. I come from a family of entrepreneurs. I mean, we're Jamaican. Jamaicans are natural, thoroughbred entrepreneurs, mm-hmm. right? My grandfather and my dad would constantly be talking about business, a couple of different business ventures going on at that time. And so I would sit around the table and listen in. And that was my early introduction to entrepreneurship. And cool. They would ask me for my input on things that at the time I really knew nothing about, but mm-hmm. it gave me a taste of what it was like to build something in the mind, put it on paper, and then see it actually come to fruition. And so that's where the motivation for that came from. And growing up, I would try to find ways of using my art to make money, basically. And, I had other things going on, like paper route and just things that kids do.
Sounds familiar.
But where I really, exactly, right. But where I really found the first couple payouts for my art was back in high school. Mm-hmm. I'd be in art class. A kid that loved to draw. A lot of my friends who were in class, some of them were really good friends of mine. Some were kids I barely even knew. But when it came time to do a project, some friends of mine would be like, "Hey, G, if I pay you, can you do my homework for me?"
So, here comes the entrepreneur.
So I was like, it got the wheels turning, and I said, you know what? Because I already knew that I had a couple different styles in me. I knew that I could observe the way someone drew or painted, and I could basically like shadow it or mimic it or replicate it. And so I did that for a couple of my friends, sell drawings for, $50 to $70, $80. And that was great. You know what I mean? That's back throughout high school. I mean, if my art teacher is listening to this podcast, she's going to be like, I knew it. I knew he was up to something. So there was that. And then through that, a number of friends of mine were also rappers, and they would ask me to illustrate their album covers.
Cool.
So I'd have kids come into my house and, with their records, and, we'd listen to the record, and they'd be playing it in the background while I was drawing and composing the album cover in Photoshop. Uh-huh. And so pre-2003, but before I went to university, those were the entrepreneurial ventures I was interested in. Cool. And that were working for me. And then once I was in art school, so I went to art school in Boston, the Art Institute of Boston, at Lesley University. And, everybody out there it was a tremendous time. My most memorable times. You're surrounded by artists and an opportunity. But video started to capture my attention. I was making videos both in class and for fun. I went to a convention where I met some people from Marvel Comics and from Society of Illustrators in New York, and just really talented artists, people that I look up to. And while I was there, I had my camera. I would take it everywhere, and it just kind of sparked an idea in my mind. I said, you know what? Let me go and ask them if they need a videographer. I went up to one artist, I think his name was Daniel DeSantos. He's a super talented artist, really great guy. And he said, yeah, that'd be awesome. We have an event coming up in New York. Why don't you come down and record it? I was, of course, in Boston at the time. So I said yes to this. And when the time came to go down and shoot this event, it was called the Art Out Loud, the Society of Illustrators. And they had really, profound artists in the industry who were showing live painting and showing people how they compose their artworks. And so really cool experience to see how they make and learn. And so I went down there with, I brought one of my roommates, another friend, and we went down, we took the bus from Boston to New York, and we shot this event. And it worked out so well that, we crafted a DVD in the end and sent it to them, and they loved it.
That's
and
awesome.
We ended up going back for 4 more years to record this event.
Awesome.
So it's experiences like these that began to tie in entrepreneurship and art for me. There was never really a separation between the two. For me, it was always part of the process that art is a business and that business is also an art. I had to find ways of bridging the gap tighter, because the one thing that you don't learn in art school is business. You don't learn accounting. You don't learn taxes. Like, these are all things that you have to know. But for some reason, the arts community just doesn't put emphasis on these subjects.
That's right.
So my art school, luckily they had a few different art classes, a few different business classes. They were mainly geared towards photographers and designers.
Okay.
But for painters and for visual artists, nothing. So I basically enrolled myself in all the business courses.
Okay.
And so I'm in a room with people who are in other disciplines, and that gave me some more knowledge that I would eventually need, stepping into starting my own company.
Yeah, he obviously had some foresight there, so good for you, man.
Yeah, thank you. It's always been important. I think that my folks drove it into me that, you have to understand your craft and your business inside out. And later, when you ask me about Gcamwil Art Academy, I'm probably going to shed some light on why I chose the certain topics for the courses and what that means, because it will be bridging the gap between both what it means to be creative in the studio and how to operate it from a business perspective.
Awesome. You're absolutely right. There's no marketing course or PR course in any of these artist stuff, right? Or even like art courses and photography courses. They don't teach you that stuff. So it's definitely good that you kind of went out and learned on your own and built that foundation for sure. Since we're talking about it, let's segue into it. Let's talk about some of these courses you have. So I was looking and it says how to see color, shape, and light. You also have something, how to draw from observation, how to draw from imagination, thumbnail and sketch design, how to expand on creative ideas, how to produce your work in a large format, forget everything you know, the art of business. Those sound like pretty cool topics there. So yeah, go ahead and speak on that.
Thanks, man. The framework for these courses, the reason why there's 8 is also going back to my background as a martial artist. I mean, I started practicing Bakwa and Qigong back in my first year of university. I had just an amazing martial arts teacher, a true master. Of course, we called him Sifu.
Yep.
And we would focus on the 8 directions. We'd focus on, because the entire technique in Bagua is the ability to combat 8 different opponents at the same time, right? And the only people who learned Bagua were the guards of the emperor. I was kind of taking that on, big martial arts fan and kung fu fan. So I wanted to integrate that into my school as I built the framework for these courses. So that's why there's 8 in total. And then I began to consider what would be the most important 8 subjects that I would have loved to learn from day one.
Yeah.
The very first thing is you have to learn how to see color, shape, and light. Observation, understanding the data that's coming into your eyes and your ears is really where you get a taste of what you're going to create. So once you're sort of in that centeredness of seeing color, shape, and light, the next step is how to draw from observation. Drawing from observation it's been very important in traditional curriculum, but these days, I think some schools and some teachers have gotten lazy with making drawing from observation important. this goes back to what we're talking about with the skull.
Mm-hmm.
If you can draw a skull, if you can understand how to draw a skull, you can draw anything. It has all the shapes that you would ever need to know. And so, drawing from observation, going out into nature, sketchbook, drawing trees, drawing the river, drawing people on the bus, drawing your own hand, drawing self-portraits, that would be skill number 2. Skill number 3 is taking all the information that you've cataloged. That's what it is, right? Drawing from observation is creating a catalog in your mind so that you have a database to pull from. And that's where drawing from imagination comes into play.
Okay.
Once you have those skills, you then want to start to craft it into art. And in order to create anything big, you want to start small. Course number 4, thumbnail and sketch design, is the ability to take what you have in your imagination, draw it into small thumbnails to craft out your composition and to craft the elements and the design of the artwork so that you can blow it up later. So I'll always teach my students to make these little small sketches as concept designs.
See, that makes sense to me now. Sorry to interrupt you there, Garett, but that makes sense to me now because, honestly, when I look at a canvas, I'm like, you want me to do this? What? How? Right? I don't know, but that makes so much sense to me now, like to start from a thumbnail or a sketch design. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think the main premise of all my courses is I want to build practicality into the process of making art. Because you're right, when most people see a large canvas, the first thing they think about it is they're intimidated. Right?
Yeah.
And, on the flip side for myself, like I've had teachers who literally pushed me to paint bigger because I started as a draftsman, illustration, comic books, graphic novels, anime, all that stuff. I love that. Yeah. And that was my foundation. But I had this wonderful teacher at my childhood art school, Fiona Mowat. She would push me to constantly paint bigger. So that's where the thumbnail and the sketch design got ingrained into my system. Because once you have a small mock-up, you can blow that up to any scale you want. Mm-hmm. And if you watch any of the great muralists out there, that's exactly how they work, right? They take a small design, which they will then project or map out onto the wall, and then it keeps everything in its proper place. So moving on to step number 5, how to create and expand on creative ideas. That goes back to pushing yourself to do things 1% more, 10% more, a little bit bigger. It's very easy for artists of all ages and of all experience to hit a rut where it's almost like a little bit of a plateau. You might have been doing the same thing successfully for some time, but you're bored of it. Yeah. That definitely happens in the artist's mind because we want to push ourselves in new directions. And so expanding on creative ideas is exactly that. It's taking what you have and seeing how you can push it or do it 5, 10, 20% more, small increments to big increments.
It's almost like a workout routine.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Exactly. To me, the discipline of making art is a mental workout. It's a kung fu, in my opinion. Course number 6, how to produce your work in large format. So that dives deeper into finding the confidence to go big. I think every art student should try their best to go bigger, no matter what it is that they're doing. But in order to do that, there are certain skills you have to have in place, not just the thumbnail sketching, but also how does the viewer interact with a large work of art? How far back do they have to stand from the artwork? How near do they have to be? How will that mold their experience? So this gets deeper into the user experience, let's call it, between the artwork and the viewer. Now, step number 7, forget everything you know. Probably one of my favorite courses, and it's the most intimidating for most people. So there's this thing, when you first get into art school, the very first year in school, what they try to do is they try to break you down. They try to make you forget everything you know so that you can start fresh. I remember in my first year in art school, a lot of the kids around me were terrified of this and even stubborn about it. Because who wants to forget what you've spent all your time learning? And who wants to try new things and do things differently if it's working for you? But it's an important step because this is where you begin to melt what you think you know, and then you open up your mind to seeing things a little bit differently. And it's breaking down your own limitations. That's the true meaning of forgetting everything you know. It's easy for us to be held back by what we think is right. And sometimes if you turn the ball just a little bit, you can see you can see the picture very differently. So forgetting everything you know is taking courses 1 through 6 and what I like to call melting them together.
Sounds
melting
cool.
them together from a new perspective. And then finally, course number 8, the art business.
Yeah.
I wanted to end a series of courses with just a very practical course in how to structure, whether you're a freelancer or a gallery artist, or thinking about just how to turn your art into a business. That's the whole meaning of that course. I wanted to fill the gap for my students where art schools that I have been to weren't focused on, because none of them were focused on the art business for the artists.
Yes.
So I took all the content that I was thinking about when I was sort of frustrated with the fact that it didn't exist. I took all that and I poured it into course number 8.
That's awesome. No, very good. Very, very good. If anybody's out there interested in one of these classes, definitely go to www.gcamwil.com and have a view at his studio and his paintings and his classes. Everything's on here. So yeah, definitely have a peek and see what you think. Let's talk a little bit about your ad agency. What's going on these days? Like, I know COVID's all messing everything up out there, right? And obviously, as an ad agency, like I'm sure you're having your challenges and you have to pivot your game a little bit as well. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about that.
I'm the co-founder and the president of a digital advertising company called CEREBRUM Marketing Group. I co-founded this company with my father, Keith. We started back in 2014, and starting a marketing agency was just a very practical thing to do. Like I was mentioning earlier, we're always talking business growing up. And as we were looking at the way that the world was going, technology was really taking off, social media. And I think that we just saw an opportunity there to build a skill for the future. So when we first began, we were learning a lot about digital marketing. We were kind of getting our bearings into where people are finding the most value, how to use all these platforms for the most impact. And while we were doing that in the first couple of years of our company, we were mainly a creative agency. We started off by creating media walls for trade shows, outdoor signage, indoor signage, LED backlit signs, a lot of the stuff which we were making in-house. We were pretty hands-on with all this.
Okay.
And so anything that we could do to help our clients market, both from a guerrilla standpoint and from a brand recognition standpoint. When we launched the digital advertising department, this was roughly around 2016, we were only focused on how do we help our clients make money. What we're trying to do is solve the problem that we had at the time, as well as the problem that a lot of other people were facing. And so what that came down to was something called client acquisition and retention. How do you get clients and how do you keep them? There are many different forms of marketing. And whenever I talk to people about marketing these days, it's almost as if everybody's a marketer. And there's even a little bit of like a scoff.
Yeah.
Oh, you're in marketing, right? Like, okay, everyone's a digital marketer. And I get that. I mean, the access to it is wide open. But because marketing is such a broad subject, we've been paying a lot of attention to educating our customers as to what exactly type of marketing we do. And once again, that's customer acquisition and retention. We could focus on, we have people who ask us about social media or about PR and things like that. And maybe we'll step into that one day, but we like to narrow our focus down to just that, because that's where we're able to help everyone grow the fastest and with the most predictability.
Very good. Yeah, very cool. If you ever need any stuff like that, like ads and stuff like that, definitely reach out to Garett. I'll share his information again on the YouTube here, and please give him a follow. He's at Gcamwil on Instagram. Very talented artist, my friend, and thank you for all the valuable information you shared with us. And I think actually, you know what, I learned a lot, and I'm not an artist at all, so so that's really cool. I wanted to say something though, like yeah. I'm very good with my eyes with pictures and stuff like that. So I wanted to say that the picture of you and your mom and the picture of you and your dad, like those are two amazing pictures, man. like the smile on there for all the three of you, like that's awesome. I love those smiles that you had in both those pictures, like, and same with your mom and your dad. That's awesome. Thank you. Cool.
I'll let them know.
Keep that passion, my friend. Thank you for coming on my show. It was definitely an honor for me to have you on, and I look forward to more stuff from you, man.
Man, it's been awesome. Thank you so much for having me on the show, and I wish you very, very well. I hope you have lots of amazing guests, and it's just a pleasure to be on. at this stage.
Awesome. Thank you so much. For all of you listening in, please, again, hit the subscribe button, like button. We'll catch you next week. Thanks.
Beauty. Thanks, everybody.